All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. First of all, as I take a look at the YouTube gathering, I can see the numbers climbing really quickly. So it's so exciting to have so many people joining us live today. Obviously, we love doing these events and broadcasting into classrooms pretty much every school day of the year. So it's so exciting to be able to continue doing these events in such a different time and be able to broadcast live to educators, parents, and students at home. So it's so great to see everybody starting to join us live. So before I announce today's field trip, I am going to share with you that we are using Slido today. So I've pasted the link into the chat sidebar on the right where you can introduce yourself and send in some questions. But if you head to that link, it'll take you to a little room where we have a poll open right now about where you've seen sea turtles before, whether it's in the wild or aquariums or both. And throughout, we're going to put little polls and little quiz questions for you to answer as you're tuning in and joining us. And then we'll take some questions from there too, because you can take questions, you can upvote other people's questions. So we'll take questions from both the YouTube chat today and the Slido room. All right, let's get down to business. We're so excited to be heading to the Florida Keys today to join the Turtle Hospital. We have Teresa joining us at the Turtle Hospital. So the Turtle Hospital is an incredible facility that's been rehabilitating sea turtles in Florida for a long time. So whether they're sick, they're injured, they do their best to bring them back to health and then return them to the wild. So it looks like it is a beautiful sunny day at the Turtle Hospital. Teresa, it is so awesome to have you joining us live today. We are excited to meet some turtles and learn a little bit about what you guys do.
Great. Well, I'm happy to be here. So it is perfect weather. It's perfect spring break weather, just no people. But the turtles are okay with that. But because our staff is still here taking care of them every day, because they still need their medication and their wound care. But we're going to start off with some of these little juvenile greens. And so the green sea turtles are one of the more common species that we see. And these are juvenile, so they're on the younger side, probably only about 2 or 3 years old. And with green sea turtles, they're not actually green. If you look at them, they're kind of brown. So where does that name come from? Well, these guys are primarily herbivores. So in the wild, they eat things like seagrass and algae. Here, they get romaine lettuce, kale, green peppers, green stuff. And they eat so much of that green stuff that their fat, their insides, turn green. So it's kind of like you are what you eat. Just be glad it does not work that way for us. This could be all sorts of different colors. And so currently, we have 12 of these little juvenile greens. And these guys were all transferred to us back at the end of February, just about a month ago, because they had stranded up on the northeast coast of Florida. So St. Johns County, Flagler, Volusia, Brevard counties. And they were just very weak, debilitated. So kind of just a mess. They had been floating for a long time, which floating in a sea turtle is not a good sign. It typically means something's going on. But they were just floating, very lethargic, very weak, tired. They hadn't eaten typically in a little while, so they're most of them pretty skinny. But most of them also had lots of growth on their shells, so lots of algae, lots of barnacles. So one of these guys, so like little Ariel, when she first came in, that's what she looked like. All those little things all over her shell, those were all barnacles. And a few barnacles is normal, but that amount, that's just going to add extra weight and cause extra problems. So first thing we do when they come in is remove all of them. That's why these guys have some kind of patchy marks on their shell. That's where those barnacles were removed. So the moment their shells are just a little bit tender, a little bit sensitive, but the shells will heal. But these guys will be with us for probably a couple months. We have to make sure that they get nice and strong and healthy, and then we'll ship them back north to where they were found, so that way they can be released. But this kind of event has happened the past couple of years. We're kind of February, March rolls around, and you get these little juvenile greens that strand. And we're not really completely sure why. We just pretty much deal with the symptoms, and then they go back north and they get released. But Every year we typically get different amounts. This year we ended up with 12. Last year we had 22. It all depends on how many strands and how much space the turtle facilities up on the northeast part of Florida have. We'll kind of get whatever turtles they don't have space for. And so when we get a large group of turtles like this, we always like to pick a category for their names. This year, kind of let you guys guess a little bit. The 12 turtles that we have Moana, Maui, and Hey Hey, Ariel, Flounder, and Sebastian, Lilo, Stitch, Nani. So have you guys figured out the pattern yet? They're all Disney movies. So that way we can still refer to the turtles individually. Like, hey, I need to go weigh Hey Hey, or Sebastian needs to get his medication. But you can also refer to them as a group. You say, hey, we just did the Disney Greens. They're all good. So just keeps it fun. Last year when we had the 22, they were all named after herbs and spices. So we had paprika and cinnamon, thyme, cream of tartar. So just fun. And luckily the sea turtles, they don't know what their names are. They're not like dogs. They don't respond to their names. Their names are really just for us. And then especially when they're patients, we try to keep their names written on their shell. That's why you'll notice a lot of these guys have a little bit of yellow paint on their shell. Those are their names, or kind of an initial of the name. So that way we can tell them apart. We can make sure that we're giving the correct medication to the correct turtle, because they don't know who they are. They don't know what meds they're supposed to be getting. So it just helps keep them separated. And it's just a non-toxic paint pen, so it doesn't harm them in any way. And then before they get released, we just make sure we just wash that off. Now he's a little speed demon. And they can be fast when they want to be. They can do bursts of speed up to about 30 miles an hour. It's just when they're sick, they tend to be a lot weaker. They tend not to be nearly as fast. But these guys have been here for a month, so a month of good eating, medication, so they're all starting to feel a little bit better, which is a good thing. So some of our turtles are more recently come in. This is Aldo Leopold. So he was named by the people that found him, which is how most of our turtles get their names, is by the rescuers. So the people that are out there on their boats, they see turtles that just don't look normal. They know something's wrong, so then they call us. And our rehab staff is always on call. They get in the ambulance and they go pick that turtle up. So Aldo here, his family that found him was from Wisconsin, and Aldo Leopold's a famous conservationist from Wisconsin. So hence the name. But he's about 100-pound green sea turtle. So all those little greens you just saw, that's because they're little. They're just juveniles, like a couple of years old. Aldo's a little bit bigger, probably close to like 12 to 15 years old. He's about 100 pounds. So those little guys will get to look like him. But Aldo came in on leap day, so not quite a full month yet. So he was found floating. And so with sea turtles, floating is not a good sign. The only time they're ever up the surface is supposed to be when they breathe. But as soon as they see you on your boat, they're supposed to dive down and disappear. When they don't do that, or they can't do that, that's how you know that something is wrong. So that's when you call us. So he turns out he does have a slightly older boat stripe to the very top of his shell. He has a couple of little wounds there, but those aren't too deep. They've already started healing on their own before he came in, so there's not much we needed to do for that. But turns out he was floating because he was very gassy. And so with sea turtles, they kind of have a tendency to eat anything that gets put in front of them. So yes, they're supposed to eat plants, but they'll also eat things like trash and plastic, anything that they can see. And then that ends up getting stuck. So sometimes they'll get constipated, and then they get very gassy because they're all constipated. So it's not fun for you. It's not fun for them. So he's been here not quite a month, but as soon as he came in, we took x-rays. We were able to see all of that gas. So we started him right away on meds to get rid of that gas. And he's been pooping. He's been getting rid of that gas. And just a few days ago, he finally was able to sit flat on the bottom, which is a very, very good sign. especially considering when he first came in, he was floating kind of sideways, kind of lopsided, because depending on where within his system that gas is, depends on how he's gonna float. And then as it moves through his system, he starts floating different directions. So those two little black lines down each side of his shell, that's Velcro. Because when he was floating sideways, it's not exactly very comfortable. So we managed to put little foam blocks, sort of like floaties, on the sides, help level him out. And then as the gas started moving, floating different directions, we could just move the floats around to kind of help compensate for that floating. But now he doesn't need the floaties because he's no longer floating. But we want to make sure we get him off his meds before we take the Velcro off, because we want to make sure that that floating is not going to come back. It's not just the meds masking the symptoms. But so far, he's doing really, really great. And hopefully just a few more weeks, as long as he continues to do well, then he can be released. But it all depends on what's wrong with the turtle as to how long it's going to take to get them better. But he's doing really good at this point. But we also have our newest patient. This is Johnny. Now he is a loggerhead. We haven't met a loggerhead yet, but the loggerheads are the other common species that we see down here in the Keys. And the loggerheads get their name because they have a really large head. And of course he kind of has it stuck up against the edge of the tank at the moment. But it is there. Got that big head. But Johnny has only been here about 2 weeks. He's still very sick, still very, very weak. So he's only in about 1.5 feet of water. He's about 75 pounds because he was found floating. Lots of algae, lots of barnacles on his shell. His shell's still a little patchy, just like the little greens were. But clearly been floating for at least 1.5 months, if not longer. So not eating regularly during that time. So he's also very skinny. And with sea turtles, you can tell that they're skinny by the size of their neck, because that's one of their fatty bits that's easy to see. So he kind of looks like he has no neck. That's because he's skinny. So he just is kind of a mess. Nothing that we can pinpoint that's what's wrong with him. Like there's no blockage in his intestines. The blood work a little bit low. Nothing that we can tell. So he's starting to eat a little bit on his own, but we're still giving him IV nutrition, antibiotics, vitamins, fluids, kind of a little bit of everything, and just taking it slow day by day. But pretty much, this is kind of what he does for most of the day. He just pretty much sleeps. So kind of enjoying the quarantine, gives him a chance to rest and to heal. But that's kind of what we want him to do for right now. We want him to rest. We want him to heal. So that's the only way that he's going to get better. It's just going to take time. And when they are sleeping, they can hold their breath up to about 5 hours. So he could be down there for a while. But one of the great things about us is that we are located right here on the ocean. So it makes it really easy sometimes when we get our turtles, because if the boat is close enough, we can come right here into our docks. And it also gives us a chance to pull our water for the tanks right from the ocean if we need to as well. But the patients are the ones that typically stay in their own tanks. But then we also have this big giant pool for where our non-releasable turtles live. Because yes, our goal is to release as many turtles as we can, but not every turtle can be released. If we're not going to release a turtle if we know that they're not going to be able to survive on their own. So like this guy. This is Montel. He's actually named after the talk show host because he came in with a lot of drama. He's had pretty much everything wrong. So hit by a boat, bit by a shark, entangled in fishing line, and he's had tumors. So he's missing half of his right front flipper, all of his left front flipper, his right eye, and his shell is dented on his left side. So he's had a rough life. So in order to be released, sea turtle needs 3 full functioning flippers. He only has 2.5 flippers and 1 eye. So he's not very fast. So not able to be released, but that's okay. here, he doesn't have to be very fast. He doesn't have to worry about boats or sharks or even finding his own food. We kind of do all that for him. So he just kind of lives out his best life here. There's this giant pool, other turtles in it, but it's also connected directly to the ocean through a few grates, so it is tidal. So it has that nice rocky sandy bottom, it's got that tidal flow, and there's also fish. So it's pretty much as natural a pool as we can make. But most of these non-releasable turtles, like this guy, this is Chance, because he got a second chance on life. You notice his butt floats. It's what's known as bubble butt syndrome. And the original bubble butt is currently hiding out there underneath the buoy, which if he decides to pop up, I'll point him out if he gets closer. But pretty much bubble butt syndrome is what happens when after they get hit by a boat, it causes that turtle to float. And most of the time it ends up being that butt that floats. So bubble butt is kind of an apt description there. So cannot release a floating turtle, so they have to stay in captivity. And so some of them will always stay with us. Some will eventually end up at zoos or aquariums, because it's the only way for zoos or aquariums to get sea turtles, because they are an endangered species. But to kind of help them out a little bit, because we want them to be a little bit more comfortable, we attach lead weight to the outside of their shell. So Kent here, he does have two little circles more towards his left side on his butt. Those are weights. So that way when he wants to, he can go down to the bottom and go to sleep. But at the same time, he can still come up when he wants to. Kent is kind of a food hog. Kent thinks that anytime he sees people, he's going to get food, which is okay, because for him, people will always mean food. He just tends to sometimes annoy the other turtles, because if he thinks you're between him and food, he'll go through you. Because with sea turtles, they're solitary in the wild. So it's something that the movie Finding Nemo got wrong. That they don't meet their parents, they don't go traveling the currents together. So when they're here and you need to keep them by themselves, they're okay with that. They don't get lonely. They just do well by themselves. And then even when you do put them together, like these guys, they're not mean, but they're not exactly friends either. They just tend to ignore each other. So they'll sometimes knock into each other or steal food from each other, but they don't care. Sea turtles have no concept of personal space, social etiquette. They would not do good at social distancing, but luckily they're not going to get it. But our biggest turtle is this big girl. This is Bowie. She's about 310 pounds. And so she's our biggest turtle, but she's not fully grown yet. Sea turtles will never stop growing. So the bigger they are, the older they are. And green sea turtles especially will get to be about 500 pounds. So she's still gonna get bigger. Just make it a lot more fun to take care of her. Okay, we got some questions.
All right, Teresa, we have lots of questions. We have lots of viewers tuning in from all across North America today, tuning in at home. A quick reminder to those groups tuning in at home, I just put it back in the message bar. If you go to our Slido room, you can find some polls to take part in live during the events. And in fact, we had a poll open to start the event asking people where have they seen sea turtles. So about 10% of people said in the wild only, about 30% of people said at zoos and aquarium only, and then 60% were lucky enough to see them both in the wild and at zoos and aquariums. So that's really cool. I just shut down that poll and I've opened a new question. This one is quizzing our audience about how many species of sea turtles they think there are. So that's open right now. We'll leave that open for a couple minutes to let people answer while we jump to our first live question. So this question came in via the Slido room, and this is Juliana Pallet wants to know, Teresa, how do you remove the barnacles from the shells when the sea turtles come in?
So there's not really an easy way to remove the barnacles. You just kind of have to pop them off. So it stings just a little bit, kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid. But the problem with the barnacles is that a couple is normal, a few is normal. But when they have a lot, like Ariel did, that means you can't get an x-ray, because all you would see in the x-ray is just barnacles. And when they have that many, it starts to damage the very outer layer of their shell, which is a keratin layer, just like your fingernails. And so you just kind of have to pop them off very carefully. And then once we get them off, then we can treat the site, especially if it has peeled off a little bit of that keratin. So that's why those little guys, their shells look kind of patchy right now, but it will heal. They're just kind of tender until that keratin kind of fully comes back in.
All right, great question to get us started. We're going to jump into another one here. This one I'm going to take from the YouTube live chat. And let's see. Here looks like a good one. So Jason Kessler is wondering, how do you get the larger sea turtles out of the ocean? Like you just told us about one that weighs 300 pounds. How do you get them out of the ocean and where they need to be?
It's not always easy because sea turtles are not very helpful in that regard. So they don't understand that we're trying to help them. So they just want to get away, which is not very helpful. So while they're here, we have people and we have mussels for our big pool. And Rebel decided to pop up. That's him in the corner. He's another one of our loggerheads. You can actually see his big head because it's not kind of stuck up against the wall like it was for Johnny. But here we do have a lift. So this is how we get our bigger turtles, especially from our big pool, in and out. But for getting them actually to the hospital from the wild, that's not always easy. So typically it's just boaters and fishermen that find these turtles. So when they call us saying, hey, I found this turtle, now what? If the turtle's on the smaller side, then we can give them permission to reach over, pick that turtle up, get them on their boat, and then we'll just meet them anywhere on land. But if it is on the bigger side, like Rebel here's 240 pounds, he's not exactly little. When they're on the bigger side like this, then we'll ask them to stay with that turtle until we can get Fish and Wildlife or the Coast Guard or somebody else out there that has a better boat to be able to get that turtle, or at least more people to help lift that turtle. Because a lot of times that's what it takes, is just muscle power.
All right. So Teresa, I had opened a poll question asking our audience how many species of sea turtles did they think there were? And this is the answers we got. 4 said 12%, 53% said 7 species, and then 35% said 13 species. So Teresa, who is right?
There are 7 species in the world. So there's 5 species that are found around Florida, but 7 in the entire world. So the 2 not found around Florida are the olive ridleys, which those guys are typically in the Pacific Ocean, kind of the southern Atlantic, which we did have one last year. It made it really fun. His name was Harry. But then the 7 species would be the Australian flatbacks, which are really only found around Australia. But the 5 found around Florida, you've met 2 of them. The loggerheads, these guys with the big heads, the greens, ones that are not green. We do have a 3rd species in this pool. Her name is Bender. She's a Kemp's Ridley. And they're also known as the ghost turtles, because they more of a lighter color, more of a kind of a light grayish white. But Bender is very good at hiding, so I'm probably not going to see her. But she's a really cool turtle. She likes to live up to that ghost name, though. And then we have the leatherback sea turtles, which are the largest of the turtles. I told you that Bowie, our biggest one here, currently 300 pounds, she'll get to be about 500 pounds. The leatherbacks will get to be about 2,000 pounds. So they get massive. Luckily, we don't see them very often because they like to spend most of their lives a little bit further offshore. They like much deeper waters. But then last species found around Florida are the hawksbill sea turtles. The hawksbills get their name because they have a very sharp bird-like beak. We don't actually have a full hawksbill, but we do have a green hawksbill hybrid. This is Maisie. So she's part green, part hawksbill. Kind of has characteristics of both. Because the other, her head is kind of not as blunt as a green, but it's not as pointed as a hawksbill. It's kind of in between the two. She just currently has it hiding underneath the little toy there. She must have an itch. That's why these guys get toys, so they can scratch their shells if they want to, because they can exactly scratch their shells with their flippers. They don't work that way. But the other cool thing about hawksbills is that they have a very pretty tortoiseshell pattern on their shell. And so her shell's kind of in between the two as well.
All right, so I just opened up another question in the Slido room. This one, we're asking people, why are green sea turtles called green? So where does that name come from? No cheating, no Googling, and we're going to answer that question in just a minute. We'll see how everybody does. Zoe is wondering, what is a big problem that many sea turtles are facing in the wild?
So a lot of their problems do have to do with humans. We're kind of their biggest problem right now, because yes, they do have natural predators, especially when they're younger. Birds, fish, sharks. Like Trinity here, she was bit by a shark. She's got a little chunk taken out of her shell, missing a flipper. But she's healthy now. She's completely healed. She's getting ready to be released. But as long as they have 3 flippers, they can be released. And that's actually how she got the name Trinity, because she only has 3 flippers. But most of the problems that we see are human related. So a lot of times it's because they've eaten trash or plastic. They get entangled in fishing lines. They get hit by boats. That's why most of the bubble butt turtles are here, because they've been hit by boats and that trauma caused that floating. But Maisie, when Maisie came in, she had tumors, which is something that primarily green sea turtles get, but it's been found in all the different species. It's a virus called fibropapilloma. We call it FP for short, but it causes tumors to grow on the soft tissue. So the neck, the flippers, their eyes, which of course makes it very hard for these turtles to see or to swim. So when Maisie came in, that's what she looked like. All those little things all over her eyes and her neck and her flippers, those were all tumors. And so hers weren't so bad. They weren't very large yet, but still caused her lots of problems. So she's had a few surgeries now. She is now tumor free. She is doing amazingly well. All that's kind of left are just a few scars, but we still want to keep a close eye on her, make sure that those tumors are not going to come back. So that way we can make sure that she really is completely healthy before she gets released. She has to build up an immunity to that virus. But even the tumors, a virus, it links to water pollution. So even things that we don't necessarily see, like trash and plastic, things like water pollution runoff, still affects these turtles.
All right, here's a fun question from a couple students at home. We've got Athena 7 and Zoe 5 in Waterdown, Ontario. And they're wondering, can you hear a turtle's heartbeat with a stethoscope through its shell?
Not really. Just because they do have that hard shell on the top and on the bottom. And that shell is bone, which is a good thing because it does help protect them. But when we do their heart rate, we have to go on the neck. We use a little Doppler. So it sounds a little bit different than it would be for you. But that's how you can tell their heart rate. But their normal heart rate's only about 24, 28 beats per minute. So it's just a lot slower than ours too. But you can't exactly get their pulse either that way. That doesn't really work.
All right, so I've just closed the polling on our question about why we call green sea turtles green. So Teresa, they had a few options. They could have, 7% said it's the color of their fat, 86% said it's the color of the food they eat, 7% said it's the color of the algae on their shells, and then 0% thought they were named after someone named Sheldon Green. So what is the right answer?
Well, it would be pretty awesome if they were named after someone named Sheldon Green, just because Sheldon Green is a pretty awesome name. But no, they get their name because, yes, they do eat the green stuff, but the green stuff turns their fat and their insides green. So kind of both of them are right. but they actually get their name based on the color of their fat. That's just kind of secondary to what they eat. Just like flamingos turn pink, they turn more pink the more pink shrimp they eat.
All right, very cool. So I've opened our last poll question. This one is, what's the largest species of sea turtle? So pop into the Slido room and you can find your options there. But let's grab another question from YouTube this time. So this time we are going to head over, and Morgan Armstrong would like to know how many babies a sea turtle typically has.
Well, each nest averages about 100 eggs, range anywhere from 80 to 180. But typically it's about 100 eggs per nest. And we're just kind of barely starting to get into nesting season. Officially, it's May 1st to October 31st. But you do get some early nesters, but not yet down here in the Keys. But there have been a few up on the mainland of Florida. So I don't currently have any baby babies right now, because it typically takes about 50 to 60 days for them to hatch. And we'll start getting babies kind of June, beginning of July. But we do have these two. This is Ethel, and this is Lucy. These are about 8-month-old loggerheads. So loggerheads are the most common species of sea turtles that we get nesting in Florida. So when these guys grow up, they'll get that really big loggerhead head. And so typically we get our babies when they don't make it to the ocean by themselves, because they're supposed to hatch out, crawl in the ocean, swim offshore. It's all instinct. They know exactly what they need to do, but sometimes they'll get stuck. Sometimes they'll get stuck at the bottom of their nest, because the nest is about foot and a half deep underneath the sand. Or they'll sometimes get distracted by light and end up walking towards land instead of towards the water. So they're not typically sick. They'll just stay with us for a couple months, get their strength back, because they're exhausted. And then we take them offshore and release them. But Lucy and Ethel, as hatchlings, were actually part of a study up at Florida Atlantic University, trying to figure out how many girls and how many boys. Because with sea turtles, that all depends on the temperature of the nest. If the warmer the nest, the more girls. Cooler the nest, the more boys. So Lucy and Ethel, we know, are both girls. So kind of the past just about 7 years, we've seen predominantly females, almost 100% females. It's not really a good thing. The next step is try to figure out how to adjust that. But because Lucy and Ethel help us, it's our turn to help them. So they'll stay with us for about 2 years. So they hit about 20, 25 pounds. So that way, by the time they do get released, they'll have a much better chance of survival, because they'll be a lot bigger, a lot healthier, a lot stronger, less likelihood of being eaten. Because the bigger they get, the safer they get.
All right. So I'm going to grab another question here from the live chat. And this is a great one from Christina. And she's wondering if medicine used for sea turtles is the same or similar as used for humans.
A lot of it is. Not very often we have to get into the reptile-specific medications, but usually we have to. But most of what we use are the same stuff that you can use on us. So like for Aldo, the big green who was very gassy, he got a lot of Vino and a lot of gas X, which is the things we take when we're gassy. The little greens, especially the ones with the shell damage, they're getting a lot of honey and meadow honey. That's kind of like natural Neosporin. But we always have to be very careful as to what we put on these turtles, because it ends up in the water. And real quick, I'm going to shift gears slightly, because that is Bender popping up to say hi. She's the one that I told you was the ghost turtle. That's why they're called the ghost turtles, because she looks like a ghost. But she's one of our non-releasable. She's got bubble butt. But she's going to hang out in the middle and not let me get a closer look at her. But that's why they're called the ghost turtles. But yeah, for the greens with the shells, we use a lot of honey, like natural Neosporin, because we always have to be careful as to what goes on the turtle, because it ends up in the water and in their eyes and in their mouth. Great thing about honey is that it's not going to hurt anything, but it's got the natural antibiotic antiseptic properties, just like Neosporin. And it's nice and sticky, so it tends to stay on a lot longer than everything else.
All right, so I've just shared a link in the chat feed. This is a link to the Turtle Hospital website. If you want to check it out, you can dive in deeper and learn more about the amazing work that the Turtle Hospital is doing. And of course, all the money to fund the Turtle Hospital comes from donations as well as educational tours. And of course, in our time of social isolation, there are not a lot any educational tours going on. So if you enjoyed this event today and you want to help support the Turtle Hospital, there is an option to send a little donation in as well to help continue the amazing work that they're doing to help rehabilitate the sea turtles and get them back into the wild. Teresa, our final poll question here. I've just closed it. The largest species of turtle, 13% said green. Nobody went for hawksbill. 7% for olives ridley. 80% for leatherback. Who is right?
Leatherbacks for the win.
All right.
Yeah, the leatherbacks are the ones that get to be the size of a Volkswagen Bug. They are massive.
All right, pretty darn impressive. Let's grab another question here from YouTube. This person is wondering about communication. Do the sea turtles communicate in any way with each other?
Not really, because they are solitary animals. They don't really have any need to talk to each other, and they have no method of producing sound. They're pretty quiet animals. You'll sometimes hear them when they exhale, but that's about it. So as far as we know, no, they have no method of communication. That's not to say that there is none. It's just at this point we can't find it. They might have nonverbal communication, but just that we haven't been able to see it. But no, they don't talk to each other. It does tend to make our neighbors a little bit happier because they don't have to listen to barking turtles.
All
Just to
right.
keep it quiet.
Fair enough. Awesome. So Teresa, the young family wants to know, what is your favorite part about working with the sea turtles?
The turtles. Turtles are awesome. And one of the great things about working here is that we do get the chance to help them. But it's always great when we get to release them into the wild, especially when they come in and they are in such bad shape. Or turtles like Maisie that we get to kind of watch them as they get better, especially turtles like Johnny. We're still rooting for him just because he is so weak right now. So it's really nice to see how he changes as he gets healthier. But it's also really great just to teach people about turtles. Because with a lot of people, they don't ever get to see sea turtles. Like, not many people have seen them in the wild just because down here, it's normal. But not everybody can live in the Keys or near the ocean for that matter. So the more chance we get to teach people about turtles, the more people care and more they're willing to help.
Okay, another question from YouTube. This is Sydney. Sydney wants to know, has there ever been a time where you've had too many turtles at the hospital?
We've come close. So we typically get in about 100 turtles every year. That's about average. Currently, we do have 48. So I'm not mentioning everybody during this. So if you want to check up on all of our other turtles, you can do that on our website. You get to meet everybody on there. But the most we've ever had was back in 2010. Back then, it got kind of cold, or cold for us, let me put it that way. So the water temperature here in the ocean got into the 50s. It's a little bit too cold for the turtles. That's why they tend to like Florida so much, because it stays pretty warm. Sea turtles, they are reptiles. So they're cold-blooded. They get their body temperature based off the water temperature. So when the water gets too cold, they get too cold. Their bodies pretty much shut down, just like us in hypothermia. It's called being cold stunned. So back in 2010, when it got that cold, we ended up with about 200 turtles. They ended up with a few thousand turtles throughout the entire state of Florida. But luckily, they weren't really sick. They were just cold. And we just put them in little kiddie pools everywhere we could possibly put a kiddie pool. Kind of held on to them for a few weeks, waited for the water to warm up, and then we were able to let them all go. But luckily, it doesn't get that cold down here very often. That's kind of one of the reasons why I moved down to the Keys, because I don't like it being cold.
All right, so I've opened one more poll here. This is a word cloud poll. So those tuning in can Let us know in one word, summarize in one word what you thought of today's lesson, or maybe something that you learned from it. So one word that you're taking away from today's lesson, or what you thought about today's lesson. And then let's grab one more question here. Let's go back to YouTube. All right, so we have someone who's wondering about the shells. Can the shells of a sea turtle regenerate after an injury?
Well, they can heal because that shell is bone, so it is going to heal. Just like if you break your arm, you have to wear a cast for a couple months, but it does heal. But if you get an x-ray years later, you'll still be able to see in the x-ray where your arm was broken. So kind of same thing with the turtles, it's just that their bone, that shell, is on the outside. So yes, it gets damaged, it heals, they'll just have a scar. So like Trinity, let's see if we can get a good view of her. She turn the other direction. Sometimes they don't like to cooperate. But Trinity, she's the one that was bit by the shark. And so that shark was actually able to bite through that left rear section of her shell, which she's been here since the middle of November, so it is healed. But she'll always have a little chunk taken out. Because that shark must have been a little bit on the larger side. She's about 30 pounds, so not exactly tiny, but it's healed. It's not going to cause her any problems. Just give her a little bit of character. It's always a part of growing up, but she'll be fine.
All right, so I've just shared another link via the chat. So this is a link to our site, exploringbytheseat.com, where we're gathering all of the events that we're running over the next few weeks. There's probably about 50 or 60 live events up there, including another journey down to the Turtle Hospital in the Florida Keys, which obviously we can't wait for. Teresa, the number one word coming in so far from those taking part on Slido, amazing and awesome were the number one words, but then care and barnacles were the next highest words coming in as well from today's event. So very, very cool. Don't forget, I did share the link to the Turtle Hospital's website. Check it out, dive a little bit deeper, learn a little bit more work of the work that they do. And if you're able to, make a little donation so they can continue doing the amazing work that they're doing in the Florida Keys for hundreds and hundreds of sea turtles. Teresa, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and, you know, taking some of us maybe further north in the US and Canada and showing us some amazing sea turtles in the beautiful, beautiful Florida sun.
Well, sea turtles are awesome.
All right, very cool. Well, Teresa, thank you so much. Have a great week, and we look forward to our next event from the Turtle Hospital.